Hi, everyone, and welcome to the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and celebrity interviews live from the Grotto with Greg Hanna. Greg, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing fantastic, Neil. I had a phenomenal week, and I can't wait to speak to our guest.
I'm excited. Again, we have Daytona 500 winning race car driver Derrike Cope. Derrike, thanks for stopping by, man. And I tell you, it just keeps going and going. But has racing cars been in your blood your whole life?
It has. I certainly come from a racing background. My father was a top fueled race car driver, and he was in NHRA, the dragsters, and he was a touring professional. So it started early, and then he had an injury building facility in the Pacific Northwest in Tacoma, Washington. And I started grinding camshafts at 14 and, became really indoctrinated to the engine side of things. And then I was playing baseball, got hurt, and then one thing led to another, and I started driving a stock car.
See, that's just an amazing part of that whole thing. So you're playing baseball. Were you a professional baseball player?
I was scouted by the Cubs and the Orioles out of high school, went to college on a scholarship, and I had a complete blowout in my right knee. And I was a catcher, so it pretty much ended things at that point. So I had to change gears. And obviously, racing was something my brother had started, and my father was obviously excited about us getting involved. And one thing just took off, and I started doing it. And I think I started in 1980, and I was driving professionally in 1981.
Wow, that's incredible. What was the first car that you started racing, and what was the first race that you were in that you won?
I started off in what they call the late model sportsman division, which was basically one division lower than what an actual Winston Cup car was at that time. So, what they call the Cup Series, and it was just a lower division, but the same cars could race in the races like at Riverside, which is a cup race. So it was a very unique time in the sport in its infancy there back in the late 70s, early 80s. So I grew up running a cup car basically and ran it on the local short tracks up in Yakima, Washington. And one thing led to another, and I started traveling the West Coast.
Wow, it's definitely. And when you won, did you think you were going to be that good at race car driving at that point, or was it? What was your mindset at that point?
Well, my father, I think, he had a lot of vision about where the sport was going. He was building engines for cars that were traveling. They were running the Winston West series, and they would run against the Cup cars that come from back east. So, we had a lot of vision and knew what I had to do. He felt like, obviously, he said, "You're never going to be the best race car driver in the world, but you need to be the most well-rounded and the most versatile." So I took speech classes, marketing courses, and what? I just started getting involved with RG Reynolds and the Winston brand. They were doing a lot of promotions back then, and I was able to really win some races, get some notoriety, and I was driving the only Ford on the West Coast. So that really gave me an opportunity to get factory backing from Ford Motor Company, and then I got 7-Eleven as a sponsor, and then things started taking off.
Well, that's amazing. I have a question for you. I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, back in the 80s. And, one of the things he used to talk about was, when he would talk to Mario Andretti, and Mario Andretti would say, don't look at the wall unless you want to hit the wall. That's what Tony came back and said that. What other racing tip, could you share real quick besides looking at the wall?
Well, that is the key thing. It really is the optics of racing is optical. It is one of those things where you really have to move your eyes constantly, and you really, because in cup racing, you actually look out the rearview mirror almost as much as you do out of the front. You're really you're in defense mode a lot. So you're always blocking. You're always positioning yourself. You're making all these counterproductive moves, but yet they have to be done to position you well. So it really is an optical thing. And I think that's the biggest thing I tell young drivers in my coaching is you have to look way ahead. You have to be looking, in every aspect. You have to really be optically moving your eyes to where you want to go, because that's where ultimately you're going to turn the wheel.
Wow. It's unbelievable when you talk about those things. Now, how challenging is it to be a professional race car driver? Now you're talking about the reaction time and different things. How many decisions do you have to make in a race? Just like alone when you're doing, driving the wheel, not when you're at pit stops, but just driving.
Well, when you're in the Cup Series and you're running at speeds over 200 miles an hour, things happen really quickly. But your mind and your eyes are very unique mechanisms, and that things slow down. And that's the thing that I think is so interesting, is that you can go 200 miles an hour and then you feel like you're going 75 until you turned around backwards. Then the business picks up. But it really is one of those things where, you know, you really sit back in the seat and you're making all these conscious decisions vary in milliseconds, and you're processing, your mind's processing somebody talking to you on the radio, telling you clear low if you want it, clear high if you want it. They're lining up, the energy is building on the high side. So I take all this information, I listen, and I process it. And you're doing it in milliseconds because you're traveling the length of a football field, you know, in a matter of, you know, a split second. So you really have to just absorb all this and make those decisions quickly. And ultimately, you know, it's easy to make a mistake, but you become so in one with the race car that it becomes very instinctive. And that's what I love about it. And I think that's what I try to teach young kids about: getting comfortable in the race car, sitting back in the seat and absorbing it. All your senses are heightened.
Wow. You know, given all of that, you know, is it safe to say that a race car driver and maybe a fighter pilot have to have a very similar mindset and, you know, physiology to manage and control the engine like that, the machine that they're driving or flying?
Absolutely. I think there's two ends of that spectrum. One would be riding a bronc. You're just hanging on. You're driving a projectile that is going through the air, and there is so much excessive movement because of the air, and it's disturbed. And like you say, a fighter pilot, the same thing. Things are happening so quick. You become one with the airplane. You're dealing with, you know, all the elements of, you know, traveling a projectile through the air, and all the elements that you don't really know or understand, but you become very proficient at once you know, you're very good at your trade. Same with race car driving. You know, you become like sitting in front of a computer. You know, it's easy to make all those choices and things just happen and you type without looking. In a race car, same thing. You physically can look and you can see it. You can pick out people in the stands going 200 miles an hour because everything slows down and your mind just processes it so quickly. So I think the same thing as a fighter pilot. I mean, very technical. I mean, and things happening at a high rate of speed.
Wow.
What injuries have you had in your career?
Well, I've had several bad crashes, and you know, I've had, you know, multiple, concussions, obviously. And back then, you just drove hurt. But I had one bad crash at Richmond, and the throttle stuck going in the corner, and we hit concrete walls, not like today where they have the soft wall technology. So I hit a concrete wall, and I was conscious for the whole thing, and I didn't get my eyes closed quick enough. So I saw this big flash of light, but instantly I stayed in the seat, but everything's trying to exit. And I actually broke my sternum, broke my leg below the knee. I had vision problems because my eyes actually, you know, tried to get outside and they came back. I'm trying to think. I had an anterior cruciate ligament in my left knee. I shattered my shoulder blade in 12 pieces, and I didn't hit anything except the wall. So, you know, you're strapped in this thing, you know, and it took me 7 weeks, and I was back in a race car, and, you know, was just looking forward to it, you know, couldn't wait. And, so it took its toll on you, you know, so, you know, the vision problems, you know, you have clouds, and, you know, you had some distortion, and that went away. But, yeah, it's a tough business, you know, and, you know, I think that's what the lure is, though, is to be a race car driver, is that it's dangerous. It's life-threatening, and you have the control of this thing that doesn't want to be controlled.
Wow, it's amazing. So what's it like inside the cockpit? You know, you look inside of the you know, the cars, they're pretty minimalistic outside of protection and fire and so on, but it's got to get really warm in there. It's got to be a little uncomfortable. I didn't see a lot of AC. You know, talk about that a little bit. What's that experience like?
It's changed over the years. You know, in the infancy, you didn't have much in there, and you didn't really have any kind of a little cocoon at all. You didn't have anything for your head. I mean, you basically were trying to keep your neck from falling off, and it was different. You always were looking around. Now, the race cars have like an actual cockpit, and the seat is custom molded to you. It has headrests that come on both sides in a very protective foam based product. And you don't have any excessive movement in your head at all. And you basically are in this place that is extremely hot. Temperatures of about 140 degrees for about 4.5 hours. Oh. So you will lose a lot of weight. And this, you know, the level of concentration that it takes being that hot and that uncomfortable. And you have these coolers that take in outside air, which only cool at about 25 degrees of what the ambient is coming in the top of your helmet. And some guys use these new cool systems called Rini, and they have like this glycol-ish type solution that runs through and cools, but it's still hot. I never even used one of those before, so I wouldn't know. I couldn't even tell you how good it worked. So, but yeah, it really is very demanding on the drivers. And I think it's a real testament to them being the athletes that they are, the workout regimens they have, and the manufacturers that produce those opportunities for them.
Oh, a quick follow-up on that. You're probably in communication through some kind of a helmet communication system, or, like who you're communicating with, throughout the race, and what is that like, and what kind of information are you giving them, and are they giving you?
Well, you have the radio communication with two people, and normally it's the driver and it is the actual spotter that's way up the top. And he is like your eyes and your ears, and he is the one that feeds you all the information. As we alluded to with the cockpit, you can't move around. You can't move your head. You're really focused forward. And now they have a little camera that sits out in front of you, which is a rear view camera, high resolution. And then you actually have your mirrors. But the guy up on top, that's your spotter, he's your eyes and ears. And especially in they call restrictor plate racing, where you're in the draft, the situation is that you're building 40 race cars going 200 miles an hour in the air, and all this spill off is creating void areas and pockets, and the energy builds up. So though they start telling you clear low if you want it, clear high if you want it, the middle's working. They give you all this information, and then I take it and I make my own choices. And by the tone of their voice, the inflection that they have, the time that they give it to you, and what you see visually, optically, either out the rearview mirror of the camera or out the front, you assess what's going on, and you make your conscious choice and your decision to either go low, go high, or stay put. And in the late stages of these races, when things get really frantic, that's the most important thing. And then the crew chief is the other individual that's on the radio. He's giving you input about the car, and you're giving him input so that he can make changes with air pressure or different adjustments to the car to make the car do what you want it to do, balance-wise, front or rear.
Okay.
Well, is he able to make those changes remotely, or do you have to go to and when you go into the pit, or?
Yes, when you go to the pit. So you're doing all this on the fly. And again, you're running about, on an average, maybe, on the super speedways, 40 laps before you pit. And the other was, depending on your tire wear, or as long as you can go fuel mileage wise. So there's two variables depending on the racetrack itself. But you have to give the crew chief this information as it builds. So as the many laps that you run, the race car starts to make changes. It builds air pressure. So what happens is, whatever corner it's actually maybe working the hardest, you get what they call degradation of the tire, and then you have to relate to them that the right front's pushing the right front, car won't turn, or the back stepping out on the right rear, the car's too free, so the balance has gone free in this run, and then they'll make an air pressure change to adjust that, a wedge change, or something else. And now with these new cars, they have a sway bar adjustment that you can adjust the sway bar a little bit, so you can create things that will help you get to the next pit stop, and then hopefully you make that next 40 laps faster than you did this first run.
Well,
all right. I want to go to winning the Daytona 500. Now, what do you equate that winning the Daytona 500 in other sports?
Well, that's the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Bar none. I mean, it's basically the biggest thing that can happen to you in stock car racing. You basically, you show up. Our Super Bowl's first, because it's very unique, because you have the most amount of money you're going to have for your race team, the best equipment, the most preparation, and you go and showcase your potential at the beginning, the very first race. And then everything deteriorates from there. You're running out of money. The cars are going through the process and deteriorating, and you're building all this up to try to get to the championship. So the Super Bowl, the Daytona 500 is the biggest thing that happens to you, and it changes your life. It is an absolute life-changing race, and you instantly leave that. You go on a media tour. I used to do David Letterman. You would fly up and do David Letterman, and people may not know who that is now or what, but you would go do him, and then that changed maybe the level of notoriety that you had, and then all the other media tours, and it really just made you you felt like O.J. Simpson running through the airport. People were like heads turn and they recognize you. And it's a little bit different to start with, especially if it's early in your career, but it is life changing. And to have the Daytona 500 champion affixed to your name every time that they would introduce you is something special.
Wow. That's
just like that
that's
Super
incredible.
Bowl championship, Greg, right?
And,
Yeah.
and the ring.
You get a ring, right? Yep.
And the Daytona 500 ring. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Did you get in touch with Tom Brady when you won? Did you?
No, I didn't. No, I don't have a direct connection to him. That's for sure. But back in the day, when I was doing things, you were doing country music videos with Tracy Lawrence and The Good Die Young, and you can Google that and see that. And I was doing. I had a bag deal with Fred Funk, Mane and Tail Shampoo, and I did the Greater Greensboro Open. Played with the Pro Am with Fred Funk, and you were just doing a lot of functions and activities back then, and you get to meet a lot of great people, and that's what's really special about the interaction between all the sports. And now you see you got Michael Jordan there, Brad Daugherty, of course, just won the Daytona 500. My cousin was the owner or the actual team principal for that team, and you've got all these guys that are all Pitbull, right? I mean, all these people. I mean, back in my day, it was Dan Marino and Terry Bradshaw and those types of guys. Actually, Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach. So they've all been major players in NASCAR.
Yeah. So you named two that have been on my show: Dan Marino and Roger Staubach. So yeah. Going back into, and I might have forgotten one, Greg. That's life. Let's go. So thinking about when you won that changed your life, talked about all those different things. How did you stay grounded, especially now you're still racing? You've gone so many different decades and you're still racing. How did you stay grounded through that process after winning the Daytona 500?
In my opinion, it comes from what your background is and how you're brought up, right? And I think, my work ethic was all about passion for something that you look forward to do. You wake up in the morning and you go do. And, it takes, to be a professional race car driver at the highest level, it takes total commitment. And you actually have to compromise other things in your life. And for me, you had to work so hard to be a stable fixture in the sport and remain there. And, I always was one of those guys where I always said, I'm going to be, even keel. I'm never going to get too high or too low. And I never read anything that was written, good, bad, or ugly. Now it's difficult with social media, but when I was doing it, when I won the Daytona 500, I didn't even have a cell phone yet. So it's a different dynamic. And, it's a deal back then where all we had was Speedway Scene. It was a publication, a paper, a newspaper. And you would read that. I wouldn't even read that because I didn't want to know what people said, the good, the bad, or the ugly. So I never got too high, never got too low. And I just took it as it came.
Well, that's amazing. So what are your top 3 goals that you're working on now? You mentioned you're doing coaching. I'm sure you do a lot of speaking events, keynotes, and so on. Tell us about what's going on now.
Well, my wife and I, we started Starcom Racing 5 years ago, and we pretty much took it with not a bolt one. We took this cup deal and ran it for 5 years, and then we sold it to Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin. And now I'm helping my cousin with their Trans Am program, and we started a podcast called Race Theory. And it's about all things asphalt racing. We discuss, all the things that are, the old days. I talk a lot of storytelling. We talk about what's happening now. And, then I'm going to the racetrack with my cousin, and I have my own Trans Am TA car, so I get to go race it a little bit. And so I'm just doing a multitude of things still and keeping me really busy, but it's kind of like on my terms. It's kind of like it's more about fun. It's about enjoyment. And I don't really have to be under the extreme pressure. And, I'm still out looking for sponsorship and trying to, do public speaking, trying to coach kids. Again, I wrote a book, an ebook. I got the first chapter done. It's on our website. And you can go to DerrikeCope.club or racetheory.club and you can purchase the first chapter. And it's about changing gears, about the ups and downs of motorsports and racing, a race car driver, reinventing yourself, falling out of favor, coming back to favor. And, just a lot of things that I try to teach kids and maybe give them an insight about what the do's and don'ts are and how you become a stable fixture in the sport of auto racing.
Wow. And I guess in looking at all this, owning the race car company for 6 years. What do you think? Were you competing still, or building that team, developing that and all that during that time period?
Well, actually, I wasn't an owner. Some friends of ours out of New Jersey, the Starcom Fiber Group, and it was Mike and Matt Kohler and Bill Wolleman, and they're from New Jersey, and they were actually fans of me when I was racing for Main and Tail and Bobby Allison back in the early 90s, and they wanted me to start a race team for them. They sponsored me first when I was still driving in the Cup Series, and then they wanted to start their own team. So my wife and I did it, and it was a great experience. And we actually, it was a team that made money, and it was a profitable, viable race team. And it was a great experience, and that's what we did. But driving the race car, I mean, I ran my last Daytona 500. I think it was 2021, and it was with Starcom and our folks and our group, and that was it. And now I'm just doing it for fun.
Do you think that you're going to do it for fun forever? You might come back. It sounds like the days of professional wrestling. Like you're the Ric Flair of racing, and you're like, okay, I'm going back in. I'm coming back again.
No, I'm done. I'm not going to do the Cup racing. I am, I'm just piddling with the Trans Am stuff. And I go up, and right now I do some track days. When they have track days, you can go up and rent the track, and you can go practice, have fun. And then with this new website, and we're doing with Race Theory, we're going to start to develop like a ride along program where I'll have another seat in a car, and it'll be a little bit more of a subdued car, but I'll actually give rides to people that are engaging with us through the podcast, and just give them a true experience at the racetrack, kind of like a hospitality or corporate outing, but more on a personal level, and give back and let them kind of experience what we've got a chance to experience over the years.
Wow. So quick question for you. So if driving 200 on the track feels like 75 to you, in regular life, when you're on the highway, wherever you live, is driving 65 like going 10?
You there, Derek?
I think we lost his audio or video.
He'll come back, I hope, on this. But no, I bet. Go figure what happened. So, kind of, Greg, the thing that we've learned from Derrike today is, man, the experiences of driving and how he's using that in business today. Very, very, very powerful.
No, it's amazing. Just the physiology of it. And did you catch what he said when he hit the wall that was concrete? Literally, your eyeballs come out of your head, and he had vision issues because he didn't close his eyes fast enough to keep them from coming out of his head. They literally popped out and came back. That's what he was saying. That's crazy. And that's what kind of look at those specific things and all that. Wow. So really good information. DerrikeCope.club. And I can't believe another great celebrity interviews live from the Grotto with Greg Hanna. So take care. It was awesome. All right. Take care, man. Bye. See you.